Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Working World Exhibition Career Webinar Series. We're coming to you live from Nelson Mandela Bay. And of course, the exhibition is hosted on an annual basis, but not this year due to COVID. So we are hosting a series of career webinars focusing on different careers. So we welcome you, depending whether you're in Nelson Mandela Bay, the Eastern Cape, South Africa, wherever you are watching this webinar, a hearty welcome. I hope you've got your cup of coffee or your cool drink with you. We try and keep these webinars quite relaxed and informative and interactive. So welcome to all of you. Today's webinar is focusing on a career in architecture, as well as how architecture can play a role in developing cities in the post-apartheid era. This webinar is hosted and brought to you by the Mandela Bay Development Agency, the MBDA, an agency here in Nelson Mandela Bay. So welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to start by introducing our three panelists, and we have much experience in our panelists this afternoon. Our first panelist, I'm going to introduce them one by one and ask them just to say a few quick words of hello to all of you who are taking part in this webinar. Our first panelist is Mr. Ashraf Adam. Ashraf graduated from the then University of KZN in 1998 with a master's in town and regional planning. Since then, he has over 30 years experience spanning private and public sphere sectors. Ashraf has successfully spearheaded various strategic interventions in municipal governance, land use management, and initiatives for climate change. He is passionate about promoting participation in governance by citizens and civil society as a force for change. Ashraf has served on several boards, including the Municipal Demarcation Board of South Africa, the Commonwealth Association of Planners, African Planning Association, and the South African Planning Institute. He is currently the CEO of Mandela Bay Development Agency in Nelson Mandela Bay. Ashraf, good afternoon and welcome to you.
Hello, hi, thank you and welcome everybody, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Our second panelist is Debbie Wintermeyer. Debbie grew up in Durban and now lives and works in Port Elizabeth, Alberta, having graduated from the Nelson Mandela University in 2004. She's an architect at the Workplace Agency, a practice created in 2006 with her husband, Brian. Debbie has pioneered the Workplace Agency with a focus on where future trends are taking place in the built environment. And the practice includes a focus on public art, urban upgrading and revitalization, stakeholder engagement, and heritage issues. As a woman in the construction industry and in the boardroom, Debbie has been a vocal commentator on the need for equity and other voices to be nurtured. Keen to hear more about that just now. Debbie, good afternoon and welcome to you.
Thank you very much to everyone for the opportunity, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent, thank you. Our third panelist and third speaker this afternoon is Jean-Pierre J.P. Besson, who graduated in 2011 from the Nelson Mandela University with both a Bachelor of Applied Studies degree and a Master's of Architecture degree. During his final year, JP started as a part-time lecturer, teaching presentations to first-year students. After his studies, he worked at the Nelson Mandela Bay Municipality in the Architects Division for a year before returning to the university as an associate lecturer in 2013. He's now a senior lecturer at Nelson Mandela University in the Department of Architecture and head of final year design studio. He completed a second master's and MSc in construction management by research, specializing in building information, modeling, and how it can influence students' learning experiences. JP is currently enrolled in his doctorate, which he aims to complete by 2023. JP, good afternoon and welcome to you.
Hi everybody, so nice to be here and looking forward to sharing some of my experiences within the academics side of architecture.
So I'm feeling quite exhausted, I must say. A whole page of CVs that I've introduced our three panelists for this afternoon. I'm feeling quite exhausted, but it shows the caliber of person we have with us this afternoon. And we're talking about architecture. We're talking about how architects can shape the cities that we live in, going forward. So very, very exciting. I'm going to ask, just so that I don't talk too much, each of our panelists just to share in 2 minutes a bit about their journey in this kind of sphere, in this kind of role. And I want to ask them to also include, as part of that background, what has been the most exciting part of your career thus far? So I think let's ask Ashraf, do you want to share first from your side?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. My journey has been a long one as a young activist and anti-apartheid activist, dealing with the challenges of poverty in communities, bringing about political change. And over the years, that has been my focus in working with and within government. And at the MBDA, what we're doing is to try and undo the effects of apartheid in trying to build a new society, a post-apartheid society, and what it means to be South African in that post-apartheid society. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashraf. Thank you for that. Debbie, over to you. What has been your career journey thus far? And in 2 minutes, and include your most exciting part.
Thank you very much. I think as an architecture journey doesn't start at university, it starts by exposure. My exposure came out of sitting in my father's concrete mixer truck and watching him pour concrete on the side of the main road of Durban inner city and watching buildings go up with concrete and doing my homework in his truck. My father could not read and write, and my mother got her matric but had no varsity education. So architecture exposure came for me through career guidance. And that was a key starting point. And my parents couldn't understand what architecture was, but all they wanted was better for me. So my journey started by exposure and then moved into university. And I was super grateful for career guidance. I was super grateful for people who had been exposed to the career. And that's why I find this platform fantastic, because we underestimate how many people don't know what it actually means to do what you do or what you dream of doing. And the most exciting moment for me was actually being the first person to get a degree in my family. And even though they didn't know what I was doing, and sometimes I still don't know what I'm doing because architecture is so diverse, but it's exciting for me to not only see buildings but go up, but watch my family experience what architecture is through me.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Debbie. Thanks for sharing. We'll come back to you shortly just to explore a few further options of what you shared. Jean-Pierre, share with us your journey up until now.
I think mine is very similar to Debbie, where my exposure also started with my grandfather being a draftsman. And after university, after my studies, as you mentioned, I quickly went into the academic side, becoming an educator. And I think every day is my highlight. The ability to work with young minds and shape them and be creative. To me, that is really the highlight. To see how somebody is growing in a personal way. By the end of the year, the specific students couldn't use a computer program, and now they're designing and they're producing these buildings and seeing it coming alive. So I think I'm in the very fortunate position to work with young creative minds to start to shape the future.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. So folks, this afternoon we have three diverse individuals with us. We've got JP, who's from a studying student perspective largely. We've got Debbie, who's a practicing architect in her own business. And we have Ashraf, who heads up a development agency and looking perhaps at the architecture and town planning more broadly. So it's really exciting to have the three of you on board this afternoon as part of this webinar. And I want to encourage anybody who's participating, who's watching this webinar, please send through your questions as well. We'll have some time just now to answer any questions you may have for any of our panelists. So you can direct it to one or all of the panelists, and you're welcome to then ask your questions. So we're going to try and balance today out with some broader considerations around architecture, as well as some specifics, because people, I think, do want to also know some specifics as well. So let's start off. I've got a couple of questions I'm going to ask our panelists. And then, as I say, anybody watching would like to ask any of your personal questions, please do either on the Facebook page you're following or also on the YouTube page that you may be following this webinar. So my first question, I want to get back to you, Debbie, because you mentioned that architecture is quite broad and diverse, I think is the word you used. So just for anybody who's watching this either live or recorded version, what is an architect? What is an architect? And what does an architect do? And are there any derivatives of being an architect? And I want to give you just like literally a minute and a half to answer that. Share with us, Debbie, what is an architect and what does an architect do?
You should be giving me the whole day. There's a simple version, which is you simply create an idea and a concept based on a client's vision. You prepare the drawings and you see the building come to fruition. That's in its simplest form. In its more complex form, sometimes people don't know what they want. And then you've got to work with them to create an opportunity. An architect can write a report, do an investigation, create a brief for a client. An architect can analyze a situation. An architect can do public participation in public spaces. You can contribute towards the law. You can contribute towards specifications. And when you take all of that, you can also then choose to work in small practice, which is generally one principal and a support staff. You can choose to work in medium practice, which is generally between, say, 10 to 15 people, or you can choose to work in corporate. And each of these areas and arenas have its pros and cons to it. What's most important about architecture in choosing its simplest form or its complex form or its speciality is for you to understand that the degree exposes you to various avenues, but understand what you love, understand what you're passionate about, and then the avenue and the complexity of the career navigates its way and you in the right direction.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for that. I'm not sure as a non-architect, I fully understand what you're saying, but hopefully as we go through this webinar, you can unpack it some more for us. But quite diverse. It sounds like there are diverse operations that an architect does. So that's very exciting. So before we get into more of the specifics of becoming an architect, I'd like to take a slightly broader view and ask Ashraf what he and the MBDA considers regarding architecture and what the difference you believe architecture and spatial development has on communities and individuals. But Ashraf, before I ask you that question, I'll ask you to respond. We have a short video clip, which I want to show if you don't mind. We've broken into 3 parts. And I think just to set the scene as to that question we've asked Ashraf of the MBDA, we'd like to show you the first part of this DVD for about 4 minutes. So let's watch that DVD now first.
Helenvale in Gqeberha has to be one of the toughest areas in the world to implement urban projects. It has the highest number of gangs per square meter in the entire Eastern Cape province. Yet, for almost a decade, the Mandela Bay Development Agency has been implementing a wide range of interventions, from buildings and public spaces to counseling, training and support. It has rewritten how projects like these are implemented in township contexts, and it has managed to build bridges between gangs, residents, ward councillors and business.
The Helenvale SPUU is the most complex and fulfilling project the Mandela Bay Development Agency has embarked on in their 17 years of existence. Helenvale is a township in Gqeberha which was planned in apartheid and is home to 21,000 residents in 6,000 homes. The residents are plagued with severe social and economic challenges. Despite these challenges, the team at the MBDA have been able to implement the program they call Safety and Peace through Urban Upgrading. I meet Debbie Hendricks, Operations Manager. She shares with us some of the insights gained through the project's implementation. George Jerry, a social facilitator, has been working at the MBDA. He has brought over 30 years of experience in political activism to create a model for a people-centered approach to community development.
Development is not just about the bricks and mortar, it's about developing the person.
We are not here to stop gang violence. That's the job of the police. We are not interfering in the gangs and those kind of things. Through our programs, we hope that gang members or young people would be enticed to participate in the programs. So it's kind of a more indirect approach. So we have no business to be in conflict with a gang member. But when we do a project in his or her street, you're welcome, you participate in the meetings, you can join. Mm-hmm. So we respected them as people, and for us, they were part of the Helenvale community. They are not separate from the Helenvale community.
So in Helenvale, there was a lobby group of people that said, we are asking the president of the country to come here. They wrote him a letter and said, come and talk to us. Stop ignoring us, come and talk to us. We need a bit of help. And it wasn't a government department or the municipality, it was ground roots people, aunties and uncles that had interest for their kids that said, is there not something we can do? How can we just be bystanders? It's going to take all hands on deck, and that you can only moan at the government for so long.
While the MBDA has implemented a range of built interventions to improve the community, the psychosocial aspect of the project has been the most impactful. After the Helenvale Resource Centre became a no-go zone due to gang tensions, the MBDA had to come up with an alternative solution to remain effective in maintaining safety and peace throughout the ward. They implemented counselling access points providing support to victims of gender-based and domestic violence, as well as youth career guidance.
So if you talk the schools, they would mention dropouts, children, being abused at home and not having a place to go to. So the counseling centers was an automatic response to that. So whatever we are doing in psychosocial was basically identified by the community and say that, is it possible, MBDA, can you help? And understanding in the bigger picture, you need to deal with the social ills if you want to achieve safety and peace.
So Ashraf, I think having seen that video, that first part, we could really tackle a whole range of different aspects that are raised by that video clip. But we're talking about architecture and architects as a career today. So what is the link between the project that you're doing in Helenvale and being an architect or people who are looking to be an architect? What is the link up and what message do you want to bring across this afternoon?
The message I want to bring across is that we come from a very difficult past. And the young people in this discussion today, their parents would know the impact of that past on their own growth and development. And if I could just explain what a policy means on an area and the buildings. So during apartheid, if, for example, the government spent 1,000 Rand a month or a year, let's say a year, and during those times, let's say 1,000 Rand a year on an African child's schooling, it spent 2,000 Rand on a colored and Indian child's schooling, and 4,000 Rand on a white child's schooling. Now you see that impact on the schools that were built. The schools in townships, the schools in colored and Indian areas, and the schools in former white areas are all very different. That's why Model C schools are all in white areas. And there's a reason for that. The reason is they were the best schools. And when towards the end of apartheid, when they were looking at integration, they allowed certain schools to be opened up. So if you look at the school as a building, apartheid said, certain people can get certain types of education, so they don't need fancy schools. They don't need laboratories in these schools. Their sports facilities don't need to be that good, and so on and so forth. If you look at the white schools, high quality facilities, excellent laboratories, and so on and so forth. So people were able to go on and be doctors and whatever they wanted to be, and other people had to be limited by the quality of education they received. Now, if you take that policy and say, well, they declared white areas, colored areas, Indian areas, and African areas. The money spent on housing and play parks and roads and so forth also reflected that. So the quality of housing for white people, very different to the quality of housing for African people. And that's what young people today have inherited. If you want to change that, you've got to look at the buildings. If you look at the video that you just saw, the houses are pathetic. The open spaces are all concrete. There's violence. And the way in which those buildings are put together, it creates dark corners, gangetjies, as they say in Afrikaans. They create little spaces where antisocial elements can gather and stalk people and rob them and so forth. So that is what apartheid planning resulted in. It resulted in buildings being built that contribute towards the problems we're seeing in Helenvale. So the challenge to people, if we want to look beyond apartheid, because we must look beyond apartheid, we can't measure ourselves against the past. We must measure ourselves against the future. And the future must be post-apartheid. What do we do and what kind of buildings do we build that are integrative, that bring people together? So you can get buildings that house people of mixed income groups. So you can build a block of flats that can have rich people and not so rich people. The building can have shopping facilities. It can be located close to government facilities such as home affairs and schools and clinics and so forth. So the idea of looking at a place like Helenvale, you say, well, it comes from a very difficult past. It's living in a very difficult present. What do we need to change about those buildings and the way in which those buildings impact on the spaces and on the people? Because buildings impact on people. If you live in a shack and if you live in a mansion, it affects your mind differently. Okay, not saying money makes a difference, but the quality of shelter, the quality of housing, the quality of buildings affects us mentally and in the way in which we engage with our community and the rest of society. So we've improved the type of buildings and the way the buildings are put together to create better open spaces and public parks and roads and community facilities. Then you're creating the opportunity for communities to be built and new communities to be built. And I think that's the challenge and the opportunity that young people have in architecture right now.
Yes.
How do they contribute towards those buildings, and those buildings contribute towards a better society? And I think that's the opportunity in Helenvale and in all the work that we do as the MBDA.
Yes. No, that's great. And they say that knowledge is king. So I suppose you would want to share that message with future architects. So future architects can understand the past, they can understand the impact that buildings have on individuals like you've shared, and position themselves to play a part in creating a new South Africa going forward as an architect. Would that be a kind of a good summary of it?
That's an excellent summary. That the opportunities for young people as architects is that they don't have to create Sandton or whatever fancy areas they are necessarily. They can, and there are architects who do that. I mean, every building you see anywhere in the world has been built by an architect, has been designed by an architect and an engineer. And the importance of an architect in looking ahead, because a building lasts for 100 years. And in 100 years, a lot can change. So apartheid started in 1948, well, maybe before then, but officially in 1948, ended 27 years ago. We're still seeing the buildings from before 1948 and from 1948 onwards and how they're impacting on people. Yes. So if architects have to look ahead, just like town planners need to look ahead and engineers need to look ahead, architects have to look ahead and say, well, what impact will this building have over the next 2 or 3 generations. And that's the exciting part of architecture, is that you really are saying, well, I'm making a contribution not only to the present, but to the future. And therefore, I must be very sensitive to what the opportunities might be for young people or for all people in the future, particularly since the importance of architecture is to grow cities, is to contribute towards the design of cities. And the design of cities must be about people coming together, people being able to work, and people able to get to work easily, and live in an environment where they can access all things. You know, the mayor of Paris, the current mayor of Paris, says that she wants to design Paris in a way that any service, government service, shopping, social services, socializing, and entertainment are all within 15 minutes of where people live.
I've seen that, yes.
Yes, so right now in South Africa, that is not possible because poor people particularly live in a far township, have to travel up to an hour, hour and a half to travel to work. So they spend a lot of money to access work, and they come back, they won't have enough money to invest in a house, for example. So it is that it's that combination that is very interesting, that the opportunities for young people in architecture are that how do we build this new city? How do we build new buildings to contribute towards a new city where people are, where it's convenient for citizens to live in?
Yes, that's fascinating. That really is fascinating what you shared with us, and we're going to come back to a bit more of the DVD a bit later on, if you don't mind. But I want to move to JP, and JP, you're at the Nelson Mandela University. So I want to ask you, where does it all start for a future architect? What subjects must someone have done at school? Must you be a certain kind of personality type? And then can I throw in a question there as well to you to say, in the studies that an architect or future architect does what Ashra shared with us this afternoon be included in the courses? Is there a part which focuses on more than just buildings being built? Sorry, so I'm throwing in a couple of questions to you there. Perhaps you can try and tackle as many of those as possible.
Sure, Andrew, not a problem at all. So as you noted or mentioned, I'm from Nelson Mandela University. That's one of the institutions where you can study architecture. So what I will be sharing this afternoon is the admission requirements for our university. So I will just strongly advise any applicant to just visit the different universities, their website, and just double check what that specific university's admission requirements are. So let's start exactly with admissions. What is it and what do I need? So admissions into architecture is a 2-part series. So the first is you do need to meet the minimum academic qualifications or requirements, and that is the subjects that we need. So for architecture, you need maths. So that's pure maths or core maths or mathematics, if you want to call it like that. It's not maths lit or technical maths, it's pure maths. 55% minimum. So that's the only subject that you need. However, we also do have something that we call the applicant score. So that is the AS, if people heard that term. You need to count all your percentages up, excluding LO, and that must also meet a minimum of 370. So just to recap, the admin side, part 1, and that's what big admissions office is going to handle, 370 AS score, and then 55% for maths. You will get your notification to say, thank you, you meet the minimum requirements. Now, part 2 is you're going to meet me in the department to have a little chat. The technical term is to have an interview. I don't like that. I'm going to have a discussion with you along with some of my colleagues where we're going to talk about what do you think architecture is all about, what was some of your experience during the job shadow, and then what we would like you to do for us is create a creative portfolio. So don't stress. Immediately, if I say creative portfolio, people go, oh my word, I don't know, don't stress. We will give you a rundown of everything that must be in there, but we just want to see what are you going to bring to the table. As people always approach me and say, oh, I didn't do art, or I didn't do engineering, graphic and design. I will never be able to become an architect. And it's my passion and dream. You don't have to have those subjects to be able to do so. Architecture is a new language, it's a new experience, and we will teach that at university level. And to come back to your question based on Ashraf's stuff, comment on do we also teach that? Yes, we do. So architecture is more than just this funky, cool building. Now, this is me, and I'm going to quote myself and unquote myself, but there's no such thing as a cool or funky building. We, as designers, we design buildings for human beings. So it must be pleasant on the eye. So if you look at something, you must go, oh, I actually like that. But what's the experience inside that building? And also between the building or buildings, or what is happening from where I park my car and where I enter the actual building itself. And yes, today it might be pleasant because there's no buildings next door, but what's going to happen tomorrow, next year, in 10 years' time? So we do need to also plan, and that's what we teach at Varsity. What is your game plan? You're going to design in a specific way. You're going to look at now, but in the back of your mind, you're also going to think about the future and what the potential will be. So I hope I've answered all the questions in there.
No, that's great. That's great. And I mean, just a quick follow-up question, JP. I mean, is a certain personality type better suited towards being an architect or a town planner and in the building kind of industry? Or is it not really dependent on your personality type? Is it more on your skills and your interests more than your personality?
Let me answer it in such a way, because that is kind of tricky, but we're looking for people or students that is open-minded, students that's creative, people that can think outside the box. And people always ask me, why do I need to do maths? I'm not going to be a quantity surveyor. I'm not going to count the bricks. We are problem solvers, because as Debbie mentioned, your client's going to come to you with a problem. And what is their problem? They want a house or a coffee shop or a hotel or a golf estate, and you must make it happen. So it doesn't really sound like a problem, but believe me, it's problem solving. So that's what we want. We want people that can solve problems creatively, innovatively, and that willingness to learn and to work hard.
Yes. No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that. Debbie, next question is for you, and you did answer it partly, I suppose, in your introduction, where you mentioned that an architect can go and work for a small one-person business, a medium size, a large size. Currently, what would you say are the career prospects for an architect and somebody who's in the architectural kind of space? I mean, is it a positive vibe at the moment? Are there jobs available in medium and large companies, or give us the rundown on that side of things?
Thank you, Andrew. And I just want to piggyback of two comments that Ashraf and JP said individually, and it'll lead on to answering you in the career prospects. I'm going to start with JP's because I think it was fresh. The career personality, the one word I wanted to add on to yours was analytical, because you've got to analyze and you've got to have a vision, like your brain. Sometimes people are talking and you're listening, and your brain has got all these visions and colors and light and all of these things. So when you become analytical about what you receive, and then you can see the next step in that opportunity, you begin to create a personality, or you have, I think, from what I've seen, the personality that is needed. And then in terms of Ashraf's comments, I do want to say that whatever avenue you choose, whether it be small, medium, or corporate, that analytical begins to look at light, it looks at space, it looks at opportunities. And so when you walk onto a piece of land, this is how I see it. You walk onto a piece of land and it's either got a building on, or it's you need to see that building that goes on there. And you need to see the attention to detail that is required. And your mind begins to analyze using the principles that you learned at university. University is about creating principles, and you take those principles and you create a vision through analysis. And so when I come back to your question, what are the career opportunities in small, medium, and corporate? You've given these principles, and you begin to unpack it. So in a small business, you add on the arm of finance, human resources, you add on business management. You might want to get your MBA if you want to I underplayed how much administration there is in small business. And for me personally, it can be as bad as 70% administration and 30% design. So do not, in a small business, a lot of us come out of varsity and go, I'm going to do my 5 years at university, which is the minimum, depending on which varsity you go to. And then I'm going to do my 2 years of in-service training. I'm going to register as an architect, and then I'm going to start my business. And there's a gap there that most of us missed, including myself, which is the administration of running a business. In a medium practice, when you're sitting at 10 to 15 people, the administration and the human resource component increases more. So your interpersonal skills not only goes towards your staff, it goes towards your client and your staff. So you as a personality type, you need to be able to balance each of those, and you need to find new business at the same time. So the personality arm of I need to read the newspaper, I need to know enough people, I need to networking skills. You need to think quite carefully about them in small and medium practice. So the career opportunities in small and medium, you actually have to create them yourself, because you have to get yourself out there. You need to talk. The network that you create at university creates, in my opinion, your career opportunities. Word of mouth. Have you done well at university and your career, your guidance counselor or your lecturer, what have you done different? I receive a number of CVs, particularly now as the economy is changing. And if you send me a 2-page CV that just says, my name is Tom, I got a master's in architecture, I did in-service training. Take every opportunity in your varsity to put yourself out there, engage with your lecturers, engage with the people that are talking, because that's where your career opportunities are.
That's great.
And now, the other thing that happens is our economy. Our economy goes up, then it goes down, and it goes up. And you can enter the market at a low point. I consider now to be a fairly low point in our economy, and that the work opportunities are varied. You can go overseas. The UK is apparently booming. But we as South Africans have our own story around work opportunities. You can move to another province, Joburg, Cape Town. The reality is I believe career opportunities are as available as you make them to be through your network. So I can speak negatively and I can say there's no work, our economy is failing, we're at the lowest possible point in our economy. There can be truth to that, and people are being retrenched. We can use all of those words. But the advantage of architecture is if you have an analytical mind and you create a vision, and every sentence that you create can be an opportunity. Every person that you meet can ask you to build a building.
Yes. Yes. No, that's great.
Answers your question.
Thank you, Debbie. No, that's a very balanced view, and I like the way you broke it down into small, medium, and large. And I think what really stood out for me is that I know architecture is a very specialized career path, but what you've also highlighted today is the importance of those softer skills, something even as networking skills, administrative skills are also come into play. So the more you can gear yourself up to be proficient in those kind of skills, the better for you personally. So I think that's a good challenge to all those who are listening this afternoon to our webinar. We're running out of time very quickly. Yes.
Can I just make one comment? Just the corporate platform is the one that I didn't play to. And that is where you can be quite specialized. When I was in the corporate world, I climbed that ladder. By the time I got to the top, I was a full administrator. So you can go from full administration to the top when you're in management to doing very detailed technical work in drafting. And all of those are personality driven.
Yes, that's great. I'm going to ask our back end that if there are any questions on our Facebook or YouTube pages to bring us up onto the screen. And while the first question, if there is one, is being brought up, maybe JP, I could just come back to you and say, if someone doesn't meet the criteria, they haven't done maths at school, but suddenly now realize they have an analytical mind, haven't got the requirements, but would still like to consider architecture as a career, are there any options available? Are there any bridging courses, catch-up courses available, or are you out? I think you're on mute, JP. No problems.
Absolutely, there are two options that one can explore here. The one is to relook at your matric and to better your marks, or to improve or to add maths to your subject. So that would be the one route in going. Unfortunately, the school does not have any bridging courses. However, one thing that we are very proud of as the School of Architecture, we've got two departments, the Department of Architecture, so that's where I'm from, but we also have the Department of Architectural Technology and Interior Design. If you don't have pure maths, for instance, you can start your architectural journey with the Architectural Technology Diploma, and in your 4th year, you can move over to Advanced Diploma in Architectural Technology Design, which is linking to the bachelor's degree, and then move on to the honors and master's degree. And then the 3rd program is interior design. You can also do a diploma in interior design, get a feel of the built environmental industry, and then start the architecture degree. So you will once again start from 1st year after completing the interior diploma. That will just replace your grade 12 marks. So I think they run about 3 options that I gave now that learners can explore.
Perfect. No, that's great. So it's good to hear that there are options available. So that answers the question really, really well. I think we do have a question that's coming through now from one of our platforms. Here's a question here from Jonathan Penrith. What are the biggest differences between architectural technology and architect? What are the biggest challenges? The biggest differences between architectural technology and architecture.
JP, do you want to start
myself,
the technicals part, and I'll do the backend part?
So that's why we're smiling myself and Debbie, because that is a question that we really often do get space to explain. And so Debbie, as a fellow architect, I do need advice here as well, but tell students or learners when I do see them is, if you think architecture, we are the designers of spaces. We engage with the clients. We fully understand their visions, and we come design.
We seem to be losing Jean-Pierre here in our connection. Jean-Pierre, we're losing you, but I think we'll try and get you back.
Looking at the construction methods, the materials, and the preparation of documents and visualization. We do work hand in hand. I think I just want to put that out there. Any good architect will have his architectural technologist with him or her, as well as the interior designer. So the one's not better or more important to the other. It's also what your niche is and what your personal liking is. If you're a person that loves the technical side, the resolving of drawings and technical details, that is a design itself. I think people always think about design and it's these great spaces and lovely. How a column meets the floor, or how you put a cornice onto a building or skirting, that is a design element as well. So, and that is I don't want to call it the small, but it's technical, the construction detailing, and that will be where the technologist comes into play. Debbie, I don't know if you would like to elaborate a little bit more.
I think what we'll do, Debbie, if you don't mind, there are other questions coming in, so I'm going to ask maybe if we can refer yourself and JP and Ashraf as well to the Facebook page press afterwards to go and answer that more in detail if you would like to. There's a question here from Avayule Hoza. What are the different areas of focus for an architect? Who would like to tackle that in 30 seconds? We've got 4 minutes left of our webinar, but that question...
I think one will be technical drawings, visualization, administration, and design, if I can pick 4 areas.
And people relations, extracting information from people to get the vision, your communication. If you aren't able to verbalize what is in your head, then the intention, the communication to get that idea implemented is challenging.
If I could just add, I mean, there are also architects who focus on different things. So you might have architects who focus only on industrial buildings, or architects who only focus on social housing, architects who work with non-government organizations to improve local designs in local areas and things like that. And then, of course, you get big commercial architects, what they call star architects, who do these international fancy buildings and that kind of stuff. So there is a range depending on who you are as a person. What is it you want? And if it is your intention that one day you want to be known as this architect who designed this big fancy building, that's an option to you. That's an opportunity to you. But if you want to be at the other end, someone who's unknown, but only known in the community, but made a big difference to that community by using the skills as an architect, by improving the quality of housing in that area, fixing up schools, showing different building materials that can be used and things, that's also an opportunity. So I think the beauty of architecture is that it gives you a core set of skills, both in design and in imagination. And that is brought together by who you are as a person and what your individual interests are as a person. And that's the exciting part of architecture for me. I'm not an architect. I wish I were. But I think that's the beauty of architecture, is that your personality and your interest in life will drive what you do based on the skills that the universities and where you train have given you.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Ashraf. We've got one last question that's just come up here quickly. His hi, JP. With the COVID-19, most architect firms in PE work from home, so the job shadow requirements is quite a challenge to achieve. So can this be relaxed, or how should one go about this? Talking about job shadowing, is that part of the requirement of qualifying, JP?
That is correct. So part of the creative portfolio is we are requiring them to at least spend 1 day in an architect's office just to see what the life of an architect is. So we fully acknowledge that during COVID, it is really very, very difficult. And there's only a handful of firms that do allow. My suggestion will be is, yes, we've relaxed that requirement, but I will strongly advise students, so Chris, to give them a call and ask them if they would, the principal architect, if they would be so kind as to spend 3 or 4 or 5 minutes just online with you. It could be telephonic, it could be Teams, it could be WhatsApp call, just to explain in that person's own voice, what is it, what an architect do? What is his daily job? So although we've relaxed it, I think it will still be beneficial for a learner just to make that call.
Perfect. Colleagues, thanks very much. We've come to the end of our session. I think there's been so much rich context and content to be shared here that I can see we could probably carry on for a few more hours with our very experienced panelists this afternoon. But our time has run out. I want to allow each panelist literally 20 seconds, and I'm going to be measuring you 20 seconds to give your motivation or challenge to future architects or future individuals who are considering a career in architectural kind of field. What is your motivation or challenge to future architects? And I think as we ask each one to share, we'll try and bring up their contact details or their website that you can go to for more information as well. So let's start with Debbie, your motivation or challenge to individuals considering or thinking of a career in architecture.
My motivation is that it allowed me to be who I am, and I could find various opportunities to expose myself to prepare my vision. My motivation is that I love the detail, and the challenge would be is that if you love what you do, You need to communicate it to others. And every opportunity, even in a bad economy, will always be a challenge. And so you take every challenge and convert it. And that sounds cliche. Convert a challenge into an opportunity. In architecture, it is really that.
Sure. No, that's great. Debbie, I didn't see the details on the screen for the workplace agency, but just to share with us, you've got a website, www.
theworkplaceagency.co.za, and we are, if you search the Workplace Agency on Instagram and Facebook, both Brian and I are active, and the Workplace Agency is active on both those platforms.
Perfect. That's great. There we go. There's the address up on the screen. Thank you very much, Debbie, for your contribution this afternoon. Much appreciated. Jean-Pierre, over to you. Your 30 seconds from the Nelson Mandela University. What is your motivation or challenge to young folk, or anybody for that matter, considering a career in architecture?
Mine will be, have big dreams. Don't put limits to your abilities. If you dream big, you can make a difference, and you can make a change.
Excellent. That's great. Aim for the moon, and if you miss the moon, you'll land amongst the stars. I think that's how it goes.
And then if we're there, we design a few buildings.
Excellent. Excellent. And then lastly, but not leastly, Ashraf Adam, the CEO of the Mandela Bay Development Agency, our host for this afternoon's webinar. Ashraf, thank you very much for your support of these career webinar series. What is your challenge you want to leave with future architects?
For as long as human beings have roamed the earth, there's been a need for shelter. And as we've become more complex as a society, the buildings and the shelters we build have become more complex and interesting. And as society moves into this fourth industrial revolution, fifth industrial revolution, and as we proceed and progress into generations and millennia to come, there will always be a need for shelter and roofs over our heads, and therefore there will always be a need for architects. And the type of architect you want to be is depending on where you see yourself fit into that society. And that's the great opportunity. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Ashraf, and thank you to the MBDA for hosting this webinar this afternoon. I want to thank our panelists again. Thank you for being part of this. To all those who are following on Facebook or YouTube, please do keep your eye on the Working World Exhibition Facebook page. We've got 2 more coming up in the near future. On the 30th of September, we have a career webinar on pharmaceutical and pharmacy careers, hosted by Aspen Pharmacare. And on the 14th of October, hosted by Saimi, careers in the maritime sector. So very diverse, but we look forward to having you with us in those sessions as well. I'm going to bid farewell to our panelists, and I'm going to ask my colleagues in the back end just to play the balance of the video, which I think we didn't get to because of time. And if you would like to also mbda.co.za, that video is also available to be viewed there. But let's watch the end of the video, and once that video ends, the webinar for today will also be complete and finished. Thank you, everybody. Go well. Bye-bye.
So there are people at the bottom area that will never come here. The people from the top area that will never come here. So when we said, but the projects were all over, and the projects are for everybody.
So we had 2 options. We had the MBDA building or the stadium. And we were looking in terms of what is more resourceful, and we came to the stadium.
It came at a time when the projects has halted. There were a lot of victimization, contractors being gun-pointed, run off the sites, gang fights, the area being too volatile for contract workers to come in, for staff to come in. So everything just ground to a halt. And we then got brutally honest with the community to say, this is yours to lose. What are we, as a collective, but essentially the community of Helenvale, going to do to ensure that that doesn't happen? So we need safety on the sites. We need commitment from all the structures, that whatever happens on site, we will keep talking. We will not stop the project. The bus can move. You can talk on a moving bus. the bus doesn't have to stop to talk. So there's no reason to stop a project. Everything can be resolved. The agency is fairly small, so it's a small engine, but it's got a lot of agility to do things a lot quicker than a municipality can typically do, and conclude a lot more partnerships with different entities and community organizations, etc., that the municipality struggles to do. So over the years, there's been a number, obviously the KfW Bank being the main funder, but I mean that's led to other initiatives like with GIZ, but the government departments, the Department of Education, Department of Social Development, I mean, they are of funding some of the counsellors at the CAP centres, which is the counselling access points that we have at schools and at the police stations, etc.
For schools that we work with, that's a very dynamic partnership that we have there, with the clinic, with the police station itself. You know, we have signed up the social infrastructure, the churches, etc. So we have built quite a strong partnership in Helenvale itself with various stakeholders.
Partnerships or collaborations, they're actually hard work. They don't happen by themselves. You think you invite somebody to a meeting that they automatically would just come and just participate. So there's a lot of lobbying, there's a lot of leg work, there's a lot of trade-offs. So what benefits are there, what exchanges are there, what, you know, how do you put a puzzle together where 1 + 1 doesn't give you 2, it gives you 5, you know. So if you can convince the Minister of Education or Arts and Culture, etc., that this is something that can help them in delivery of their programs, then you know, the responses are generally very positive, and we've had some lasting impact from that.
It's footwork, you know. It's meeting people, asking people for meetings, visiting them at their houses. So it's trying to open that up and bring everybody into one space. You can have one ward where the ward councillor is very lax and he gives you kind of a carte blanche, do as you please, interact with the people. And you can go to another ward where a councillor is that everything must come through me, you start with me first. You can get in one ward you have where the main stakeholder is the ward committee, and in another one the dominant stakeholder is an SMME group. So it changed. So you have to adapt your strategy in terms of the conditions that prevail. And as a social facilitator, you need to be able to adapt to the conditions that prevail in that particular area.
People approach us now to say, but we want to work with you because of that. Because we feel heard, we feel accommodated, and there's a responsiveness and so forth. We as an organization are quite reflective at this point to say that we have been known as a building company. We build stuff. Nice things, but does it make a difference? And the honest answer is maybe, but not always, and certainly not in the ways that matter. Yeah. So I feel like, you know, the experience that we have in Helenvale has really added to our skill set and to our knowledge base. And that, you know, if you can do this in Helenvale, then you can really do this anywhere.